Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sheet of Hope channel. Today's special guest is Dave Jones of WGRC. It's an honor to catch up with Dave. I've known him for almost about a year now, so it's an awesome experience. Great person, great guy, and an even greater radio host. If you guys never had the chance to listen to him, go listen to him and Wanda at WGRC. You can get that online, and I will also be plugging that in as we go. But I want to say, hopefully everybody's having a great Independence Day. This is a day that's very special to, of course, America and really the world, because it set an example. It really did. This was a day in which we were able to go our separate ways. I know if you watch a few different things on Resurgent Life, there's a great clip, and I'll plug the clip here in the description below, of Bill McClure. He has the Historical Bill Show, and I know him. He'll be on the podcast here hopefully in the future, so I'm going to plug that. But this is a day that I hope everybody enjoys and knows the significance of, because it is a big part of history of not only this country, obviously the start of it, but of the world. So hopefully everybody's doing that. Now back to the podcast with Dave Jones of WGRC. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Host Week's podcast here on the Sheet of Hope channel. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Dave Jones of WGRC.
Yeah.
Dave, thanks for being part of this.
Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to chatting with you.
So Dave, take us through the process, because you've been in radio for how long now?
Oh my goodness, I've been here since 2006.
Okay. And that's just at the station here. Was that your first radio gig?
It is, and actually it was sort of a side gig at the time. I was a youth pastor in the area and approached the then general manager, his name is Larry, and said, hey, WGRC needs a youth show. And so me and another youth pastor buddy of mine, we approached him, pitched the idea. Remember, we took him out to eat for breakfast. You know, you always bribe people with food. And we were actually prepared for him to say no, because my buddy Todd, neither one of us had been in radio, but we both liked music and stuff like that. But we pitched this idea, and Larry said, let's do it. And we were both kind of shocked, and Larry got up and left because he had to get back here. And so Todd and I went to work tweaking our idea, and we recorded a pilot for this youth show back in 2006. And Larry liked it, but he wanted some tweaks. And so we redid the pilot, and then he said, let's put it on air. And that was in 2006, and that's what I did until 2013, when I finally came on staff here, and my role started to expand.
Mm-hmm. So when you expanded, then what kind of projects did you take on? Obviously, for people that don't know, I have been thankful that you've been able to bring me on. Of course, it was with Stephanie at first,
yeah,
but the Around the Valley series here. So thank you for that opportunity. It's been a whole lot of fun.
It has been fun.
But that was only one of the things that you pitched, and of course gone out and done with the Around the Valley series. So what have you done since? Like, you've been like the main, I would say main, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the main radio host for the morning show for how long now?
Since about 2018, 2019, I guess. So in 2013, that's when I joined the morning show. My first co-host was Dawn. The station was going through a time of transition, and Dawn jumped on the morning show, actually replacing Larry, because Larry was retiring. And so Don did it by himself for a couple months, and in the conversation, it was decided to make the morning show a duo. And so at that point is when I was invited to come on staff and join Don as the duo. And so he kind of took the lead, like I said, till about 2018 or 19 or so. And then he stepped down to do some other ministry pursuits that he enjoys. And that's when I fell into the lead of the morning show. And then, as you mentioned, you joined us with a co-host I had named Stephanie. She fell in love. The love bug bit her, and so she moved out of the area. And then that's where Wanda came in. We were able to find Wanda after we auditioned so many people, and found Wanda, who has been great to join us. So since 13, my role was pretty much morning show co-host. But that all started to change, and like I said, around 2018, when Don stepped down, I started picking up more duties. I stepped out of youth ministry. I do some pastoring on the side with the church, but the radio started to become my main focus. And So since then, I now serve as the operations manager. The morning show is the main thing that a lot of people know me for because that's the public piece of it. But yeah, we've started all kinds of outreach opportunities, different projects, and around the valley, as you mentioned, is probably one of the most fun because Wanda and I get to travel around with you and as you video our antics. But just taking any opportunity we can to get out in the public, out from behind the mics and into the public.
Now, I'm going to assume this was not something like radio per se. It was something that you went to school for.
It's not, and that is the neat thing about radio, any format. Obviously, we're a Christian-based format, but, radio anywhere can be the same. There is definitely school and degrees for it, communications, degrees, broadcasting degrees. Those are certainly available. But also there's this trend, if you will, in the industry where people are coming from just taking real life experiences. And, if you can get up at your place of employment, whatever the industry is, and speak and share and lead discussions, you can do that on radio. And you're just communicating. Your audience just looks different because it's you or you and a co-host in a room, so you don't see the audience, but the audience is out there just like if they were in person. And so for me, it was coming from that pastor background, speaking in front of people on a platform, and basically I just changed my platform. And so all of my radio experience has been on the job experience, but because I've been surrounded by good people and there's been opportunities out there, it's certainly paid off, and I'm having a ball doing it.
Well, you've also, and I think this is something that you benefit from as far as coming into radio the way you did, because you've lived almost like this full life early on rather than knowing what you wanted to do. And you've always because normal people that come into this industry always are behind the camera. They're never experiencing life going out these places, but you come with all this life experience and all these stories to tell and bring it to the radio. When somebody sitting behind the microphone necessarily doesn't always have the stories to tell because that wasn't their full-time job. So
Right.
you want your full-time job and all the hats you used to wear.
I think that's right. And people have talked about that before. And again, I think that is somewhat of a trend using that word. So when I was first thinking of, oh my goodness, I have to create content, right? And it was actually difficult to do. Like, what do I come up with to talk about? Our show goes from 5 a.m. till 9 a.m. So what do I talk about for those 4 hours? I got to create something. But then as I started transitioning in, it's like a light bulb moment, right? Once I realized, wait a minute, I got all of these stories that happen outside the studio that have happened outside the studio because, I have done these other things. I said, there's my show content right there. And even as I've come on board GRC full time, it's, I have a family, I am involved in other things. I go to the store just like people who don't work on radio. I have hobbies just like people who don't work in radio. And so you take those life stories, and everyone else has them in some way, right? My hobby might be different, but everybody has a hobby. They may go to a different store than I do, but they go to a store. So I started realizing that all you got to do is take your life experiences and use the radio platform, and you're making those connections, because that's really what radio is all about. It's connecting. People don't really care what degree you have or don't have. It's just, can they connect? Can they relate?
Yeah. And it's no secret for the people that have listened to you on air, because you always bring this up, but you have served this country.
Yes.
And you have some stories that you've told on air. And there's going to be a specific one that I'm going to go back to later in the podcast that you told at the Stuart Tank Memorial Museum.
Okay.
That I kind of want to, because I thought was interesting to me back then.
Yeah.
Because we shot that, how many months ago?
That's
4 or 5,
ago
somewhere back then. Which, if you haven't, check that out on WGRC's YouTube channel and their website. But to highlight how you've served, do you mind opening up with that story about how or what you did as far as serving for this country?
Sure. So when I graduated high school in '88, lived in Tennessee at the time, and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I graduated in June of that year, and in July found myself in boot camp in the Navy, and served 12 years, 2 years active, 10 years reserve. My active duty time was on a battleship, the USS Iowa. Absolutely loved it. And then my reserve time was spent on the Navy side, and then 4 years of my reserve time with the Marine Corps. At that time, this was before radio, before ministry. I had gotten my nursing license in Tennessee, and so once I got the nursing license, the Navy transferred me to the Marine Corps side because the Marines utilize the Navy nurses, or the Navy corpsmen as they call them. And so I spent my last 4 years of reserves with the Marines as a Navy nurse, and loved it. And after 12 years, decided it was time to get out. My older kids, who were obviously younger at the time, they were. I was missing too much of their stuff, even though it was reserves. It was still eating up a lot of time, and so after 12 years, I decided it was time to move on. But definitely look back at this 12 years, both on the ship, active, and in my time in reserves, as an amazing time and a great opportunity that I had to serve the country.
So, Dave, before I get into the question I wanted to ask you, which just relates to, and I want to talk about your spiritual life and Christianity and stuff, because you talked about, like, I didn't know that you were even like had your nursing license, and all these little like hats that you have worn over the years. So, did you always have that? Like, now, of course, nursing is saving physical lives, but you're also saving spiritual lives and people as well. So when did you find that faith? Was that something that you grew up with as a young age? Did you go through the church, or did you find it later?
So kind of twofold answer to your question. So as far as my personal faith, yes, I had that as a child. I was blessed to grow up in a Christian home. I grew up in the church. In fact, I went to a Christian school. Now, granted, none of those things will save you, in my opinion. You have to have that personal relationship with Jesus. But those things certainly put me on the right path of having people teach me. I was taught about Jesus at a young age, so I always had that aspect. As far as going into ministry, the pastoring or Christian radio, that was not on my radar until much later in life. I've always had my personal faith. Those years that I was in the Navy and I was doing civilian nursing also, I would not have ever thought that being on radio or pastoring would have been in my life's plan at all.
So the story I'm going to ask you about, you talked at the Stuart Tank Memorial Museum, that if you didn't hold the door for somebody and like just missed the moment, you would have been on a different battleship, and it would have transpired your life in a whole different way.
Well, actually, it would have been the same ship, but a different gun on the ship. So in April of '89, I was on the USS Iowa, the battleship, and there was a gun explosion. Turret number 2 exploded. Turrets are the big guns, 16-inch guns, and the battleships had 3 of the 16-inch gun turrets, and there was just turret 1, 2, and 3. And I was assigned to turret 3. It was turret number 2 that exploded, and 47 of my shipmates were killed. But the way I see God's hand in things, and you don't know how many times this happens in a given day, how many times God looks out for you. But I remember 3 of us were new when we reported to the ship. We had to fly out to Cuba, to Gitmo, as many people have heard that term over the years. We flew to Gitmo, and then we had to take a small boat out to the ship because the ship was too big to come into the harbor there. And so we were climbing up the side of the ship, and the Navy tried to keep everything simple. The first guy through the door went to gun number 1, second guy gun number 2, and third guy gun number 3. Well, I was actually the second guy, and I had stepped partway through this door, and the chief that was there was ready to assign me to gun 2. But my buddy behind me had his hands full and was fumbling around trying to keep all his stuff. And so I stepped back and held the door for him. And he wound up going through and was assigned to gun number 2. And then I wound up in gun number 3. And I remember the chief, he got a little annoyed at the moment because I caused a little hiccup in his assignments. But I wound up in gun number 3. Now, the cool part is that the guys that were assigned to gun number 2, they had a choice of duties. And you could either work in the gun or I believe it's the lifeboats that they were manning, because we had to have lifeboats manned during all the gun shoots. And so that day that the gun number 2 exploded, my buddy was not in the gun. The one I held the door for was not in the gun. So I didn't have to go through that mental state of thinking, oh my goodness, I held the door for someone who's now dead. I didn't have to deal with that. But I do know, had I been assigned to gun number 2 and would have been given the choice, I would have taken the gun because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to shoot the big guns. And so I look back on that now. And so even though the ship has been decommissioned, it's now a museum in Los Angeles, but I've been able to go back to that door and get my picture in front of the door and say, hey, this is the one. This is the door that I held open that allowed me to be here today. And I don't think that was a coincidence. I think God, had something to do with that. Maybe made my friend a little klutzy or clumsy, so he would fumble with his stuff and, caused me in my heart and mind to say, hey, I got to hold the door for this guy. But yeah, that door made all the difference. If it wasn't for that door, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
You told a lot of stories on air about your military career.
Yeah.
Is that the most inspirational, or do you have callers call in talking about like, hey, something else stuck out to me? Like, what has been your most liked or like brought somebody to a certain faith, or like the most feedback on one of your clips? Has that been one of the top stories? Or?
The military is part of it. I don't talk about it a whole lot randomly on air. Usually if there's a connection, because again, the whole point on radio is connecting in the moment, right? So military comes up more in conversation, like during the patriotic holidays and stuff. And there are times when I share the stories, and I've shared about the explosion story before, or being away from home. Those stories, when I do share those, and a lot of times around the patriotic holidays, people do jump in and they had similar stories, or they remember being away, or maybe they were the family member that was home and their loved one was away. But so there is a connection, and obviously right here in Central PA, a lot of military families in this area, and so that's just one of those life stories that does build a connection, and that story is going to reach a certain group of people that another story is not, and so it does come into play.
And I also hear that you're in love with your soundboard a lot too now in the studio. What is your favorite button to press on the soundboard? You have a lot of Wanda buttons.
I do have a lot of Wanda buttons. Favorite button. I'm going to give my co-host Wanda a shout out. It's my Wanda buttons. Now, much to her dismay. So, everything we say is recorded, and which is a lot of fun for me, because I have a few buttons that I can make Wanda say what I want her to say. And so we have a lot of fun with that. So, actually, I think I have two favorite buttons. They would be equal. One is Wanda saying that's correct, and then another one is Wanda saying I agree, and the other one is Wanda's husband saying, Dave, you are correct. And of course, not that I ever took those out of context, but I have fun with those buttons. We get a lot of toys here. It's like we said, we get paid to play, and so it is a lot of fun.
And technology has, I'm assuming, changed a lot over the years since you've been here. So,
yeah, it has.
How new is that soundboard? Is that
so that would be the second soundboard that I've been on, but it's got a few years behind it. But technology has changed. We've gotten more digital since I've been here. When I first started, we still had the ability to play CDs every now and then. We had a lot of music built into the computer, but we still had CDs that we would pop in every now and then. And of course, prior to me coming, if you go back to the original technology of WGRC, it's changed a lot. But even in my time here, we've seen a difference. So it's a lot easier on one hand because the buttons are all right there. You're not swapping things out. But yet, on the other hand, it's more technical. So you got to watch what buttons you're pushing. But we have a lot of fun.
Do you find it easier, or do you not easier? Do you like the era in which we're living in with the technology that we have, or do you wish that we would go back to the old-fashioned ways? Like, what was better to connect with people? I'm assuming, like, obviously, the more digital we are, the easier it is to connect. But like, as far as like spiritually connecting with people, because that's what you're doing on Christian radio. You're trying to spiritually reach them. It's not all about the looks and appearances and necessarily the stories, but stories do captivate. But how do you connect with your audience? Do you feel it's better how it is now, or do you feel like there's too many distractions now and rather go back to the old way?
So I think it depends on how you use it. I kind of joke around, but it's also, there's a serious component to it. I love technology, but I also love that knowing how to do things manually. I think we get too caught up in technology, and then what happens when technology quits, right, or goes down. And I think today a lot of people don't know what to do when there's no technology. Um, in our context of radio, I think the technology is good if you use it right. So because of technology, we're able to reach around the world now. We have listeners listening in other countries, and we get reports, listeners from other countries that are listening. That wouldn't have happened before. So in that regards, technology is great. With social media technology, it's great for what we do, because now when Wanda and I are on air on the radio, we will occasionally turn on the camera on a Facebook Live or something like that, and we will interact with folks live. So while people listening to the radio are listening to a song or something, we're able to connect with other people who may not have the radio accessible. We're interacting with them through video. So I think technology is great, and I'm glad radio embraces it. However, I think it's also important as radio, because we are building relationships behind the mic, that we do take the opportunity to get out into the public, so we can go old fashioned, if you will, and meet people face to face. I think that's important, because that is going to tighten the connection, to give them a reason to turn it on our station, for Wanda and I in the morning, for our other on-air hosts at, different parts of the day. So I think technology is great, and you need to embrace it, but you need to embrace it in order to connect, and not to forget that face-to-face as you have opportunity.
From the first phone call to the first time you brought me into interview for even the Around the Valley job, I have met all beautiful, perfect people here at the station. Everybody brings their own energy, brings their own morals and spirituality to this project and this station. How many people does it take to maintain a station like this?
So for us right now, we have 14 of us here. 5 of us are full-time. The other, that'd leave 9, right? I did my math right. The other 9 are part-time at different levels. We have some part-timers pushing, like 28 hours a week. We have other part-timers doing like 4 hours a week. So it depends on what their job is, but there's all kinds of opportunities at a station as ours. A lot of people, obviously, they understand the on-air portion, but there's so many people behind the scenes. We have a receptionist, a financial secretary. We have people that just run the board. They're not on air. We have so that when like Wanda and I go out somewhere to do a remote live, well, now we need an extra person to be in the studio to run the board, and we have an engineer. A lot of people may have never met Chris, our engineer, but they know his work, because that's why you get to hear us, is because of that work behind the scenes. And so we have a lady that does social media for us. She's not on air at all, but she does our social media. People look at us up on the web. They're seeing her work. They see a lot of our social media posts. They see her work. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes. And so in our capacity, we're a small staff of 14, but definitely a group of 14 that has come together and make a great team.
How is a small radio station different than a big radio station in the sense of, and I know again, we talked about you joining air here, so you might not be able to speak as far as like working at a big, like a huge radio station, like I'm going to blank, but like say like a big network, I shouldn't say that, but like a CNN or Fox or something like that. You're here at WGRC, you are local, but you also have a big radius, because I keep having to change all the different, different things at the bottom of the, around the valleys, but you guys are, is it close to say 90% customer / listener funded, 100% with some sponsors, or?
Well, we're 100% funded by donations, right? So it's all donations. Now that I don't know the split between individuals and businesses who come on and support us, because even with our businesses, it's being a nonprofit radio station. We're restricted as to what we can do. And so these businesses that come on board, it's different for them, but yet they believe in us enough. They believe in the message, so they come on board. So I don't know what the split is between individual and businesses, but it's all 100% donated funds, if you will. And that's a blessing. And in comparison to, we do all the same jobs that a large network would. It's just the individuals here might wear more hats, whereas at a large network, you may have multiple people doing one job. We have multiple people doing different jobs here. And but as far as our frequencies in Central PA, we touch 22 different counties just through our frequencies that we have. And then, of course, once you add in the web, the streaming at WGRC.com and the app, again, we can go around the world. So it's pretty amazing what happens with a small staff when you work together.
I was going to ask about, because you answered everything I was about to ask, but it was simply like, how much do you appreciate the fact that like all these small donations and that people can give back, because they're watching you and they're listening to you guys, and they're meeting you out in public and going to all these different events where you're there. I'm sure that means a lot when you get to see people that just listen to your voice, like, hey, I listen to you on a daily basis. I love what you're doing. You're so passionate. You inspire me. But also, do you feel like it helps you? Or do you feel like you bring a different energy to work every day, knowing that there's people out there listening to you and like being able to hear the message?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's fun. Fun and humbling at the same time. My wife always reminds me, because again, remember, right? We're on Christian radio, but we're all human. And so my wife reminds me, she goes, now you can't get upset in public because you don't know who's watching. It's like, oh yes, I got to be a good boy today. And so it's humbling because, you run into people and, maybe they know you by your voice or something, right? And then that's happened numerous times. And so it's humbling. And it's humbling to think that when Wanda and I know it's true for, other on-air personalities as well, that for that period of the day, people are allowing you into their lives, right? They're choosing to allow you into their cars or their homes or their work cubicles or whatever the case may be, and they're spending time with you. Because we have a texting system, we will say something and then that immediate feedback somebody will send in, oh, I needed to hear that today. Or maybe, Wanda and I, we often say, our goal is to make people spit their coffee out because they started laughing or something, right? And so we get those comments. And so it is humbling and it's encouraging when people come up to us and say, that they're listening, because again, we don't see the audience. So when we do meet up with people, either intentionally at an event or they just stop us on the street, that is encouraging and uplifting. And I think for me, some of the more fun moments, if that's proper English, is when we're out at an event and they come up to my wife and daughter and they say, oh, you must be Dottie, or you're Sophia. And people are relating to them. And that goes back to that show prep, that, just using your real life stories to connect with folks and making those connections. And there's times where, Dottie and Sophia are having the conversations with the people, and I'm just kind of in the background. But so it really is like a huge family thanks to radio.
So I could ask you a broader question, say, where do you expect WGRC, the radio station, to be in the future? But I also want to tie in, what is your vision for the future?
So I think, in the context of WGRC, I think my vision and the GRC vision, they should coincide. And I'd like to see us be good stewards of what God has given us. So, have reliable programming, have good programming that's encouraging, being able to make the connection. You have a lot of national shows that do great, and we kind of have a national show thanks to the internet, and we hope to interact with those people. But I guess there's like an extra place in our hearts for our local people as well, to say, hey, this, I can listen to a show from another state, but these people here at WGRC, they are in my backyard, and I want to get to know them, and I want to listen to them. So I'd like to think that we are making the biggest impact locally that we can by connecting with folks to where while they do have other choices, we don't want them to consider the other choices, right? We want to make that much of a connection with them to know that we are making their good days better, and that if they're having a bad day, that we are encouraging them. And so as a station, I don't think we can be stagnant or static. We have to constantly be looking, are we reaching the people's needs as to where they are in the moment? Are we filling that gap? Is there a way that we can partner with other organizations to help out? And we've done that, and we're doing more of that by participating in different drives. We're working on a duffel bag drive right now to work with children and youth services to provide duffel bags to kids in foster care who a lot of times their stuff's put in trash bags or boxes. And we're going to be working with a toy drive with a couple of girls who have put together a toy drive. We want to help these girls out, collect toys for kids in needs. And so constantly looking at ways that we can impact lives and truly be seen as valuable to the local area, and as well as reaching as we can to people abroad. And as far as me personally, it's humbling, and I hope to be part of that for long term, to be part of an organization doing that.